Hey kids, it's Grandmaster Ben FInegold here with Kid Chess. And I want to show you a really famous game today that was played by a former world champion, Emanuel Lasker. He was the second world champion after Wilhelm Steinitz. And this game was played over 125 years ago. His opponent was Johann Bauer. I'm not sure who he was. Bauer, actually, I've heard that name, but I don't know what kind of chess player he was. Obviously, he was a good player if he was playing the world champion. Now here, we have a very interesting position where material's equal. Everybody's developed and castled, looks pretty reasonable. And in fact, if it was Black's turn to move, Black just got a battery going with his queen and bishop. You've probably seen that before. And he wants to play queen takes g2 mate. So there's a couple ways to accomplish this. One is to play c4, and if the pawns get traded, then we're threatening mate, as well as the bishop. And also there's obviously d4, which gets out of the way of the queen, and the queen wants to go to g2. So at some point, Black is looking to get rid of this d pawn so he can play queen takes g2 checkmate with his queen and bishop battery. Okay, now obviously that's probably not going to work against a world champion, but yeah, you got to try. Okay, so before White gets his attack going, which is the main point of the video, Lasker plays a defensive move, but actually it's defense and offense. Plays the move queen e2. Queen e2 doesn't look very scary if you have the black pieces, but he's just defending g2, which is good, no more checkmate. And he's connecting his rooks, so this rook can, try to join the action later. Now, queen e2 doesn't look very scary, so Black wasn't scared. Black probably thought, well, he's defending against that checkmate I wanted to do later, so all right. Okay, now, of course, White also wants to checkmate Black, and White's bishop is pointing this way, his other bishop is pointing this way, and obviously, if he's going to get his knight into the action, this knight on g3, well, his only hope is to go to h5. He can't go to f5 or to e4, those are protected. Okay, so the computer says Black's doing fine. All he has to do is stop knight h5, which is pretty easy to do. He could play the move pawn to g6. And after pawn to g6, the computer says it's an equal position. Okay, but Black wasn't worried, even though he's playing the world champion. Maybe he should have been a little worried. And he decided to push his pawns on the queen's side because White sort of trapped his bishop. And now c4 doesn't work because White has all these pieces and pawns defending c4. So Black decided on a slow build-up. He played the move a6. Why? He wants to play b5 and then c4. He's going to push his pawns on the queen's side, not only gaining space, but trapping the bishop on d3. Okay, and after a6, actually White's already winning because now White can achieve his attacking goals and Black can't achieve his, because White defended the g2 pawn. So as I said earlier, White wants to play knight h5. And Black wasn't worried about that because Black missed something that today we call a Zwischenzug. That's an in-between move. And I always tell my students, before you make your move, look for all checks and captures. If your opponent can put you in check or capture something, you should see that. You have to see your opponent's threats. That's the way you're going to get better at chess really quickly, is to see your opponent's threats and don't let them accomplish those threats. Okay. Now here, Black's already in trouble. And he didn't realize that h5 was a threat because he thought he would just take it. Now, if he doesn't take it, White's got a lot of attack going here on the f6 square. If I take on f6, White's going to have to mess his pawns up in front of his king because White has two pieces on the knight and Black only has one. So that means he's going to have to take with a pawn eventually. And that really opens up his king. But Black wasn't worried. Black just took the knight. And he knew, or so he thought, White would take back, threatening mate, and then he would play g6 or f5. For example, queen takes, f5, blocking the bishop. And the computer says Black's fine. And that's probably what Black thought was going to happen. Okay, but after the move knight takes h5, which Black did play, White did not take the knight, shocking his opponent. Okay, so can you find a move here for white that's a check or a capture that doesn't take the knight? Okay, in fact, it's a check and a capture. It's bishop takes h7 check. And if you've ever seen a video before on the Greek gift, which you may have, this is very similar. It's where you sacrifice your bishop, you open up the opponent's king, and then later you checkmate them. And this is a different theme. This is called the double bishop sacrifice. Okay, it's pretty rare, but when it works, it's pretty cool. So you have to take the bishop, I take with check, then you go back. And you're like, what's the problem? Black's king looks pretty safe. Well, we have to sacrifice another bishop. Bishop takes g7. Okay, now obviously, white's threatening queen h8 checkmate. So you got to take that bishop. Okay, and probably if white wanted to, which he doesn't, he could just keep checking the king and probably make it a draw. Queen g4 check, queen to the h file check, queen to the g file check. Okay, but white doesn't want to draw. White wants to win. So the first thing he did was check and force the king to the side of the board. Okay, and then he did what's called a rook lift, rook f3. Okay, and you move your rook up and then over, and then it's checkmate. So obviously, if it's white's move here, rook h3 is going to be winning. And it was very important, let's go back a couple moves. It's very important that white played queen g4 check first before he did his rook lift. Otherwise, black would move his rook, let's say to g8, and then he could escape with his king. He wants black's king as far over to the king side as possible before he starts the checkmate. So he forces the king over, then he moves the rook up. Black could blunder here and lose in one move. He could play king f6 and then checkmate. I'm sure Lasker saw that. Okay, now, if you want to be a good player, if you want to be a grandmaster, if you want to be a world champion, not only should you attack your opponent with precision, you should be able to defend. White's threatening rook h3, which leads to checkmate. There's only one way to stop it, and black found it. Black was a good player too. He played the move e5. Why did he play e5? So his queen could block the rook. And you might be saying, well, wait a minute. If he moves his queen to block the rook, he'll lose his queen. That's okay, because white's already given up two bishops. So if white's giving up all of his pieces and black gives up his queen and black doesn't get mated, black's going to have a lot of pieces for a queen. Okay, and that's why this was a brilliant sacrifice, because we're sure Lasker saw all the way to the end. And I'll show you what the end is. Rook check, queen h6, takes. And if you count the material, black's doing fine. Each side has a rook. And for the queen, black has a rook and two bishops. Usually, a rook and two bishops is better than a queen. However, Lasker saw further after the sacrifices and the great defense by black. He saw that he had a winning fork. Do you see a fork here, which forks the two bishops? Lasker did. Queen d7. You can't save both bishops. So not only are you going to lose a bishop, but your king is still exposed. And white did get those two pawns when he sacrificed his bishops. So black's going to be down at least one or two pawns, and he's only going to have a rook and a bishop for a queen. A queen's better than a rook and a bishop. And black's king is still exposed. So now he's just losing. And instead of giving up, never give up, he played on. Now he played king g7, getting his king safe. But, okay, his king is still not too safe. And the rest of the game is pretty easy for white. If he takes with the bishop, which he didn't do, there's a nice trick here. He can play, well, either queen e6 or queen h5 or queen f5. The point is, when I threaten checkmate with my queen, you see how the rook is here? And I threaten your bishop, excuse me, you can only play one move that saves them both, but it doesn't work. For example, let's play queen e6. Threatening queen takes pawn mate. Threatening queen takes bishop. The pawn's pinned, so you can't take the queen. If you play f6, which looks like it saves both, it doesn't work because I just take your bishop. The f pawn's still pinned. And that trick works if white plays queen e6 or queen f5 or queen h5. They all have a double threat. So black really can't take that pawn on e5. So he retreated his bishop, and white's easily winning. Now, when grandmasters play today, it's very unlikely there's a checkmate. When grandmasters are getting crushed, they just give up. You should never give up. Although, if you're playing the world champion and you're down a queen, I might forgive you. Maybe. Okay. And the game actually went a long way because black never gave up, but you'll notice he's down a lot of pawns. Okay. And he ends up losing his rook, too. That was a nice trick. Notice this is a fork here, right? So king e8 defends. This is a skewer. You have to play king e7, and now another skewer. Man, no wonder that guy was the world champion. I guess he was pretty good. All right. And in any normal game today, if two grandmasters are playing, black would give up. Okay? But black didn't give up. He had that not give up attitude. So we won't do too much with the rest of the game, but obviously black is not doing well here. All right. And white very sillily gave up his queen because he knows after takes, he's going to have 5 extra pawns, which is silly. So black gave up, finally. Okay, so that was one of Lasker's greatest games, one of his most famous games. It's called the double bishop sacrifice game. Easy to find on the internet with lots of analysis, some of it by me. A really great game, a really good attack of the black king with sacrifices, and really fun to watch. Hope you enjoyed that game as much as I did. I'm Grandmaster Ben FInegold here with Kid Chess. Until next time, bye kids.